All right. This week we're looking at kind of all of these things, forces coming together, and now Europe is really going out and colonizing other places. And what I'd like to do is really bring together the last chapter in Ferguson on property with the first little bit of this chapter on medicine. And so what we're going to be looking at is Europe going down into Africa. What we have to remember is that history has a long viewpoint here. So we haven't really looked at ancient Africa, but know that because of geographical reasons, there was a huge diversity of cultures and languages. There still is in Africa. Basically, there was so much geographic isolation where deserts, different environments separated people, so that you have a lot of different languages. Compare that with China, where you have one written language and one ethnicity. They are all Chinese throughout that entire body. There are actually, one piece in Diamond talks about how many different types of people there are in the world, and he kind of breaks us up into 6 different categories. 5 of those 6 categories are actually found in Africa, which is amazing. We have a low level of technology and worldly knowledge because of that geographic isolation, and a high level of ethnic strife. That's because of that high diversity, and it's also because of the legacy of the slave trade. You had coastal civilizations going in and pilfering people from the interior, and that really doesn't do well for neighborhood relations. Add all this, everything that's going on into Europe, which is this growing sense of nationalism, my country, my way, and whatever is good for my country, I will do, even if that's at the expense of your country. We have an increasing interest that's sparked by the people who go down into Africa and send back reports, and these are glowing adventures. Cecil Rhodes, the famous Dr. Watson, I presume, story. So all of this stuff is going on, and people are becoming more and more intrigued by the potential wealth and by the exoticism of Africa. We also want to spread our religion of Christianity, and we feel that we're compelled to do so. And we also have a real, in terms of that nationalism, there's also an economic side to that. It's kind of like Burger King and McDonald's. Wherever there's a Burger King, there's usually McDonald's. It's kind of how France and Britain were operating at the time. Wherever France goes, Britain's going to go too. Add to this all the advances that we've looked at in the past weeks. Quinine, which is actually coming from South America, the bark of that tree. The Industrial Revolution is bringing us railroads and steamships, so we can actually cut through the jungle and go up these rivers that before had to be walked in some places. And of course, weapons technology. With somebody actually wrote about it, might have been Ryan, I forget, in terms of what's happening with weapons. And this is all within a context of true racial motivation. They actually do believe at this time that it's one of the missions of the white race to help the lesser races, or take care of them. And so this is part of what's motivating us. And so we see all these things come together, and then of course in 1884 they actually have a conference in Berlin, and all these representatives from all these white European nations get down, and they literally carve up Africa and say, okay, we won't fight with you, you take this, we take this. Very, very peaceful, but there are actually no Africans at the table. And by 1914, most of Africa is controlled by another power. And of course, I've challenged you to find those other 2 if you can, just by simply looking it up. But the other thing we want to look at is that there are different ways of doing this, controlling another country. And one of the most interesting factors to me is whether or not you have settlers, so settlers from those European countries going down there. And I think that's one of the reasons that the North and South America patterns were so different. But you have direct rule, indirect rule, company charters, which are interesting, and then spheres of influence. And when you look at Liberia, for instance, No, the United States did not colonize Liberia in the sense of the word, but we protected them because we had a legitimate interest there. Basically, we didn't want freed black people in our country, so we said we'll send them back, but they needed to have a place to go back to. So we kind of protected that area. We didn't control it. So one of the things you're going to do this week is look up the difference between direct rule and indirect rule, just so you have a sense of that as you read Ferguson, and a sense of all of these things coming together and really creating a legacy that is, for a whole continent, is rather powerful and definitely long-lasting.